DualCom Pro offers installers easier, faster installation of professional signalling systems with even greater resilience. It also provides access to CSL Live, the firm's brand new device management portal, as well as the MyBase App. Following the session, you'll be prompted to join the live Q&A.
Hi, first of all, thank you for joining us for today's IFSEC Tech Talks. My name is John Coleman from CSL. During our session here, what we're going to do, I'm going to give you an update on some of the big changes in the industry, mainly AllIP, which is the PSTN switch off, as a lot of people refer to it as. And then I'm going to talk to you about some of the innovations that we have that can help you overcome some of the potential challenges that the AllIP rollout will present. So first of all, just want to give an update on AllIP. So quite simply, OpenReach have announced plans to switch off the PSTN network by December 2025. The best way for me to explain the AllIP and digital transformation is to relate it to your own home. So in your own home, you've got something that looks a little bit like this, a master socket. And into your master socket, you plug in your phone and you plug in your broadband. So that's what most people can relate to when we talk about the current PSTN infrastructure that we've got in place. When we move over to the AllIP platform, what will happen is you'll get a new faceplate for your master socket and you'll get a new router from your telecoms provider. And then the only thing that will connect to the new master socket is the new router. And anything else that requires any kind of connectivity, such as phones, Sonos, PlayStation, Sky, Xboxes, security systems, will need to connect to the back of the new router, which is connected into the master socket. So it's quite a change from what we've had over the last 20, 30 odd years, going from a traditional analog technology to voice over IP, or digital, as many people will refer to it as. So the mass migration begins in January 2022, but there are a couple of key trials that will start. The first one towards the end of 2020, which is in Salisbury. Really interested in Salisbury is that they're going to be taking fibre to the front door. The other trial that's going to take place at the beginning of 2021 is in Mildenhall, which is down in Suffolk. And in Mildenhall, they're going to keep the copper that you've got coming out of your property that goes to the green box on the street. They're going to disconnect that copper connection and they're going to reconnect it to a fibre cabinet. So you'll have copper from the house to the cabinet and then fibre from the cabinet going through to the exchange. And as I said before, it's going to be such a big change from what we're used to. So the potential impact on the 800,000 digital communicators and any legacy-based technology that's reliant on PSTN potentially means that it won't work on this new platform. So it's going to be a major change. And I think there's probably in excess of 1.2 million PSTN devices that potentially we need to look at doing something with. When we look at CSL, again, we obviously have a number of PSTN connections, so we've got to consider what happens with people that are using DualCom units. And I think this diagram is a really good explanation as to what the challenges are. So from a CSL perspective, we've got our DualCom unit in the control panel here. Its primary path is using a multi-network SIM card that goes through to the Gemini global platform and then through to the ARC, who will then call the relevant emergency services or key holders. And our secondary path primarily is PSTN, although it could be IP. But in 80% of cases, you find that most installations have got a phone line connected to them. But the challenge we get on AllIP is that that phone line that would normally go to the exchange will no longer be there. And what will happen is we'll have that new router that's provided by the telecoms provider. So at some point, you'll have to take your DualCom. You don't need to replace it. You can keep the existing DualCom unit, but you will need to reconnect it to the new router that will be provided by the telecoms provider. So that could be via IP, so you could put it into the network point. Or in the case of some of the telecom providers, BT are going to be providing a PSTN analog port. So what that means is you can connect certain PSTN devices to that PSTN analog port. It'll give out line voltage, it will give out dial tone. But either way, at some point, you'll have to reconnect your DualCom device to that new router there. Some of the challenges we get when we're connecting to routers is there's probably not any battery backup. So if there is a power cut, then you are going to lose that secondary path. As I said before, you won't need to replace any of the existing CSL connections that you've got that are using PSTN, but at some point you will need to reconfigure them to connect them to the new router. There are lots of other devices I mentioned before, the digital communicators, and any other device that's using PSTN potentially will need to have some reconfiguration, and in many cases will probably need to be replaced totally. So within the DualCom Pro range, we've got two options. We've got DigiAir Pro, which is the single path category, and then we've got GradeShift Pro, which is the dual DualPath category. So starting off on the DigiAir Pro, this is it here. When we launched the original DigiAir back in 2011, I think we all knew it would be a great success story because of the pure number of digital communicators that are still being installed, and also the challenges of connecting phone lines and in particular connecting IP. So DigiAir has been really, really successful. So this is the updated version of DigiAir. Some of the key changes on this now is that we're now using 4G technology. So we use 4G, falling back to 3G, falling back to 2G. But the best feature on the DigiAir Pro 4G option is it actually comes with 2 roaming SIMs. It comes with an active roaming SIM, and then it comes with a failover roaming SIM. And people do ask us quite rightly, well, if you've got a roaming SIM, then why do you need a backup roaming SIM? And quite simply is every roaming SIM belongs to a roaming platform. And if you get a localized issue, so a mast goes down or there's an issue with a local base station, then your roaming SIM will connect to another network and to another mast. But if there's a core platform outage that impacts the SIM's ability to get a permission to roam, which does happen, then that roaming SIM sees that there's a localized issue or a platform issue, tries to roam, but the platform's not given the acknowledgement. That means that potentially there's no signaling. So the only way for us to overcome that is to include a backup roaming SIM. So DigiAir Pro 4G uses 4G, 3G, 2G, comes with an active roaming SIM, and then also comes with a failover roaming SIM, which makes it extremely robust, especially when we're looking at replacing those PSTN digital communicators that, you know, the nature of PSTN is that it is rock solid sometimes. So it's important, if we're going to take out that PSTN connection, that we're replacing it with a solution which is rock solid and provides the most resilience available. So DigiAir Pro, first option is 4G. Second option that we've got within the DigiAir Pro range is IP only. So keeping exactly the same piece of hardware. Quite simply what we do is we introduce this IP lead here. So quite simply just plugs onto the front of the unit, and now you've got DigiAir Pro IP. So you just plug this into the customer's network point. So if you've got digital communicators in some of the more rural areas where mobile phone signal isn't sufficient enough to provide reliable signaling connectivity, then you've got the IP option. So DigiAir Pro, 4G or IP. The hardware's the same regardless of which one you go for. The next option that we've got is the Greater Pro range, which is our DualPath offering. And when we do DualPath, we've now got 2 choices. We've either got what we call dual radio or IP4G. So when we talk about dual radio, what we now do is we introduce a second 4G module with another roaming SIM on a completely separate and diverse roaming platform. So when we put these 2 modules together, you've now got DualPath alarm signaling at all grades without any wires whatsoever. So this now means that you can do an installation that's not reliant on any existing infrastructure, so you don't have to worry about network points, ports, firewalls, IT managers, etc. And you don't have to worry about the removal of PSTN. So dual radio using 3 roaming SIMs. So we've got 2 roaming SIMs on the main board, 1 roaming SIM on the additional board. So 3 roaming SIMs across 3 different diverse roaming platforms at all grades. I believe that dual radio will become the new GPRS PSTN. So before the introduction of this, we know that 80% of installs for DualPath would have been SIM card and PSTN backup. I believe that this will now become the 80% because this provides guaranteed DualPath signaling as long as you've obviously got signal available within the premises. Option 2, when we look at the DualPath range, is IP and 4G. Again, keeping exactly the same piece of hardware. We go back to the IP lead, which is this here. So plug onto the front of the device. So you've now got IP as your primary path, and then you've got 4G as a failover. But even when we go back to the failover path, we still go back to those 2 roaming SIMs, the active roaming SIM and the failover roaming SIM. So the key thing that we try to achieve within the DualCom Pro range is to ensure that regardless of what signaling you're having to swap out, be it a single path low risk digital communicator, a single path higher risk signaling device that's reliant on copper technology, or a DualCom, or any device really that's reliant on PSTN, what we try to do with the DualCom Pro range is ensure that you've got total flexibility with 1 piece of hardware and maximum resilience with multiple SIMs at all grades. What we've also built within the DualCom Pro range is a MyBase App, which basically helps, from an engineering point of view, helps you to configure the device on site. It's available as an app version and also as a desktop version. So what I'll do quite simply, I'll just show you one here. And there we go. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go into the MyBase app, which is this here. So CSL Live MyBase. So quite simply, click onto the app, put in my fingerprint to get into the device. And what you'll see when you go into the app is some information on here. You'll see the camera here. So quite simply, if you were to press the camera, what you would then do is you would go to the device that you're looking to install. So in this case here, my unit here, we just scan the QR code. And what this will now do is bring up all the information I need to commission this site using the MyBase app. So the first thing it shows me is when the site last polled. So this one polled at 1558. We can see what the radio modules are. So this is a dual radio device. So radio module number 1 is on 5 out of 10. So it's on 40% using 4G. Radio module number 2 is on 6 out of 10 using 4G. But from the app, and this is really clever, what you can do, you can click onto the options here and you can now send test alarms. So being on site or remotely, if you want to ensure that or to check that the system's working correctly, then via the app, you click on send test alarms. And what this will now do is send test alarms through to the monitoring station. So if you were ever unsure if a device was working correctly, then even without going to site, you can send test calls via the app version or via the desktop version. So really, really useful tool to have. So as we scroll down on here, we then come to the service section. This tells us a bit more about the device. So it tells us the connection ID, so like the chip number, the site name, so you can actually put the site name into this as well. When the site first commissioned, the grade of the device, the installer code, so every installer has their own unique code, which monitoring station it's connected to, and smart reporting. I'll touch on smart reporting in just a moment. So when we go on to here, this allows us to edit the address. So if you want to list all your different site details on there, you can put all your site details on there. So you could have Mrs. Smith, Mr. Brown, whatever information you wanted to have on there. So I mentioned the smart reporting. One of the big frustrations that we have as a business is radio fails. And what typically happens with a radio fail is it's 3 o'clock in the morning, the site goes into radio fail, the radio fail goes through to the ARC. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, the ARC phone the end user to say, Mrs. Smith, just to let you know, you've had a radio fail. And Mrs. Smith says, well, what can I do about it? And the ARC say, absolutely nothing, but we've got to tell you about it. So what we built into the DualPath DualCom Pro range is that between the hours of 6 o'clock at night and 9 o'clock in the morning, once the alarm is in a set condition, we will manage any single path failures which are sent through to the monitoring station. So exactly the same scenario. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, we lose one path. So it comes into our platform, we can still see the other path is there, so we don't deliver it through to the monitoring station. If it goes into radio fail at 3 in the morning, and then Mrs. Smith unsets her alarm at 4 in the morning, and that site still has that single path failure, at that point, we'll deliver the radio fail because we know that Mrs. Smith is now awake. If it goes into radio fail at 3 and someone knocks the front door in at 4 o'clock, we'll then deliver a confirmed alarm. So the only thing that we remove is that nuisance call to the ARC at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I believe that this is the best feature that we've introduced, because what we don't want is our end users getting inconvenient phone calls at 3 in the morning for something that they can't really do anything about. This is also applicable if you're doing IP and 4G and you get an IP fail at 3 in the morning, we will manage that single path failure for you. So just to move down to here a little bit more, we can see about the hardware, we can see the device ID. What we can see here is also where it says panel type. What we're now seeing is more and more installers are looking at future-proofing their sites as much as it possibly can. So I think the recent issues that we've had with lockdowns and continued regional lockdowns is that there's a challenge now for the industry to be able to maintain regularly their intruder systems. So what we're getting asked more and more is, how can I connect to my sites remotely to carry out upload, download and remote maintenance? And that's what DualCom Pro allows. So with every device that comes out, it comes with a serial lead. So quite simply, this allows you to connect to most of the leading control panels out of the box, so you can plug it onto a various range of control panels. We do different leads for different control panels. So if your panel isn't supported by this lead that comes in the box, then we do have a lead that will work. And quite simply, it's all about providing remote support and diagnostics to sites if you can't get to site, etc. So within the app, what we can do, we come onto this section here and we can go into the edit panel section. So edit panel will then allow us to choose what panel we want to plug onto for alarm signaling, if you want to do alarm signaling via serial connection, but most importantly for upload, download. So you can see there's a vast list. some very popular modern panels and some really old control panels. So depending on what control panel you're connecting to will confirm if you're able to do upload download. There are obviously some panels that just don't support upload download, but you can see there's there is a vast range on there. So quite simply, whilst the engineer's on site, you can go to whatever panel it is. For the purpose of this, we'll just select Texacom Premier TTL, and then what you can then do is plug onto the Texacom panel for your alarm signaling and also to carry out upload download. Also tells us if we're doing pins, what the configuration is. It tells us about the firmware, so you can see that my device is working on firmware 2.19. If there is a later firmware version available, then you can upgrade it over the air, or you can wait until you go to site. If there are any critical upgrades that need to be done because of certain changes, then we can advise you of these and we can carry them out accordingly, which is usually you'd call into tech support and we can advise you that we're going to do a firmware update. But again, I probably look at a DualCom Pro as a bit like an iPhone now, is that people will update the firmware on iPhones because new technology comes along and more robustness, and that's exactly the same that we're trying to build into the DualCom Pro range. What we've also built to help with from an installation point of view is that if you are doing serial connectivity and you are plugging onto those control panels, what you're now doing is you're programming up your control panel to do the two-way connectivity between the DualCom and the control panel. So on here, you can click onto the support guides, go onto the help files, and what you'll find within these help files on the panel guides is a list of these various panels that will show you how to program up particular panels. So if I click onto the Pyronics panel, for example, what it will show me is information on the lead that comes in the box. So you can see the lead that we provide has got 3 ends to it. If you want to plug this onto a Euro 46 doing a RS232 connection, it tells you that the 6-pin lead is what you plug onto the control panel. And what it also shows you is at the other end, the 3 leads, it shows you where to wire these on the DualCom Pro. Again, it's about making the engineer's experience a good experience. And what we also show within the specific guides is how to program up the control panel. As I said before, you're not actually programming up the DualCom anymore when you're doing serial connectivity. You're now programming the control panel. So it shows you step by step what you need to do when you're going into the panel programming. Feedback from engineers on MyBase is they really do love it. It just makes that install process a lot simpler, a lot more straightforward, and most importantly, a lot quicker on site as well. For anybody that isn't doing serial connectivity and is continuing to do pin triggering, then what we've got on the DualCom Pro here are the A, B, and C buttons. So within 9 steps, you can actually program a device without using the app. So if you're still doing pins, just using channels and sending signals in fast format, SIA, whichever way it is that you're going to do, then again, by just using these 3 buttons here, you can get the device up and running. So if you want to learn the inputs, then quite simply what you would do is you press and hold button C, and then what you will then see is L appear on the display. And that would display learn OK. If you wanted to send test calls through to the monitoring station, then what you would do on here is you quite simply press A until S is displayed, and then press the C button, and that's it. And then what you'll see in the display is path test OK. So if you're going to be installing this just doing pins, then again, simple and straightforward. It's just a few button presses to get the device up and running. And so the key message again, we know that we have a big challenge with those existing PSTN connections. We know we've got a mammoth task on our hands as a wider industry. We've seen recent notifications from the BSIA about installers being urged to take action just to ensure that that signalling is continuous. We've been working with installers for years and years, replacing those legacy dated systems with newer technology. Please feel free to contact us at any time, and we're more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thanks again for joining us for today's IFSEC Tech Talk, and hopefully we'll speak to you soon. Thank you.
Super stuff. So we have people joining us already Ian. Welcome to the IFSEC Tech Talks here, October the 6th, 2020. My name's David McClelland. I'm delighted to be joined by Ian from CSL. And Ian, we've just been watching your colleague John talking about the DualCom Pro range from CSL and kind of setting a bit of context right now, just while we have some more attendees join us for this Q&A session. Just set us a bit of context, if you can, around the challenges that the PSTN turn off in 5 years' time, almost exactly 5 years, I guess. What that's going to mean for your customers, what change that's going to force to happen in terms of the customer premises equipment that they currently have.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, older systems, certainly digital communicators and anything using the PSTN will, people will be forced to swap the units, or otherwise they'll be just left with a single path device when, the premises needs to have DualPath. So, it's a challenge for all installers, certainly for the installers, because half the time the end users don't really tell them when they're going to change over from one provider to another as well, which doesn't help. And we're seeing that now. We've got customers upgrading units left, right, and centre. So, albeit, yes, 2025 is a big switch off. We are seeing this happening now. And, a lot of installers are being quite proactive and actually starting to upgrade their, analog legacy systems as we speak now.
Sure thing. So PSTN, this public switch telephone network that we've been using for, I'm not a historian, but I'm guessing it's a century or so, one way or another, and moving over to IP and over-the-top services. What's that going to mean? Because PSTN in general is pretty rock solid, isn't it? We've come to rely on it. So what potentially, if anything, be honest, might we lose by migrating away from it and going to purely IP?
Well, I mean, obviously our Pro unit can offer radio. So for anybody who, is not keen on the idea of going sort of all IP, if you like, there is an alternative. And, probably 80% of our sales, what we're doing now currently, is radio.
Yeah.
Simple, because it's simple to install for one, and you don't have to mess about with the IP. If people use IP, networks and stuff, they're more resilient these days than they were in the past as well. And I think people often say that, if you get a power cut, your router goes down, which, yes, it does. But most people, when they're using the PSTN, will actually connect a device such as a DualCom onto a shared telephone line. So every time that phone line is in use, the DualCom can't actually send signals. So if you connect it on IP, how often do you get a power cut? Not very often. How often do your internet go down? If you weigh it up between, how often the phone line is used to how often the internet goes down, then, the IP side of it will probably win.
Okay, so let's come to some of the questions in the chat here, and please do keep your questions coming in. If you have a question, pop it into the box. If you like the look of someone else's question, then give it a thumbs up so we can vote it up there. So we've got a question here, just asking for a bit more on what dual path signaling means, and you touched on it just there. It's this ability to have some diversity, so you aren't purely reliant on your IP. So talk me through the options that you've got with your DualCom Pro range in that respect.
Well, from a DualPath perspective, we've got IP radio and we've got radio. So, DualPath, means basically two paths. Two paths polling independently. So radio, we will use we actually use 3 SIM cards, all from different providers, which adds the diversity there. And obviously IP is a separate path to the radio path. So, dual path signaling is basically 2 paths, 2 means of sending a signal from the monitored site to the monitoring station.
Sure, and you also talk about good kind of degradation as well in the film just now, 4G falling back to 3G, falling back to 2G if for any reason. I mean, I'd barely get any Gs where I live, frankly. I think I might get a bar of 2G on a good day when the wind's blowing in the right direction. Yeah. So another question here as well. What is the most commonly installed product in your experience? Radio, or radio IP?
But certainly radio, probably 80% of our sales. And again, it just boils down to the ease of the installation. A lot of people don't want to go IP because if you plug into somebody's network, it tends not to work. So you've got to speak to the IT guy who's going to open ports, who's got to give you static IP address details, etc. So, it's just easy to do with dual radio.
Sure thing. We were just talking about 4G, 3G, 2G. Let's cast our mind forward. A lot of conversation around 5G at the moment.
Yep.
And, there may or may not be a 5G iPhone that launches this time next week. Who knows? But do you see 5G playing a role in, in your line of business, given that 5G is all about low latency and, huge bandwidth and scale? Are there any benefits you can see it offering to what you do?
Well, certainly speed-wise, which is mainly for upload-download. So people who want to dial into their control panels and they want, quick upload-download speeds, 5G, will have its advantages. So, we're currently building some new hardware with 5G in mind, which should probably be out next year with, as I said, with 5G in mind as well. So benefits from sending signals from A to B, it doesn't matter whether it was 2G, 3G, 4G, it's probably purely to do with the upload download speeds, and that's about it really.
Sure thing. We are almost out of time. And again, if you've got any final questions, please do pop them into the Q&A panel. I guess, again, something that John mentioned in the video there, Salisbury. Interesting. So there are trials taking place around various bits of the UK, and Salisbury was one of the initial locations taken for the rollout for the move away from PSTN. Any idea why that was the case?
Why they chose that location? Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I have no idea. I'll be honest. I don't know why it was chosen as I could probably find out, I'm guessing, but. Yeah, I mean, they do say that they have these locations that they're doing trials in and things like that, but the trials happening all over. People will change, to different network providers. As I said earlier, ultimately they'll one provider to another provider, and then they'll lose the analog facility. So therefore, you've got to go out and you've got to replace the unit. So yes, they are trials. And to be fair, we heard about there's some more trials being rolled out as well in other locations as well.
Sure thing. Well, if you want to have a chat with John, Ian, any of his colleagues about this, the PSTN shutdown, the clock is ticking 5 years from now, which sounds like a long time, but it's not. It'll go like that, I'm pretty sure. What's the best place for people to get in touch with you and ply you with any further questions they've got?
I just said probably just visit our website. You've got every sort of team member, what's out in the field, in the sales team and the technical team on our website. Just contact your local sales rep, I would say.
Fantastic stuff. Listen, we are out of time, but thank you very much indeed for taking time out to join us today, Ian. And for all of you watching at home, our series of IFSEC Tech Talks continues again in just a few minutes' time. We'll be hearing from Trackforce Valiant. So stay tuned. Otherwise, see you later. And Ian, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.